Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 2 of the anime series Dance with Devils. And this one was actually really cool, following on the coattails of what I really loved about the first episode, the sort of rock opera, gothic horror aesthetic. And this very much feels almost akin to how a stage play would be plotted out. In this case, an action sequence which could be equated to being like a dance, a choreography. Do we start this episode picking up where we left off, and as the story continues with basically Ritsuka and Rem taking her back to her grandfather's house, presuming that's where the mother went based on the GPS of her phone and everything. They're trying to track down these, I guess, vampires, as we saw in the first episode, ransacking her home. And they find very much that that is the same case at the grandfather's house. But what I love is they sort of put off the song, the musical equivalent, until when Rem is actually engaged in fighting these vampire guys toward the end of the episode. And it just felt like, watching a play very much on the stage as dialogue is exchanged, the story and the momentum of the story is ever moving forward, and then we build up to a crescendo song, a piece to be performed. And in this case, it very literally translates to a choreography where the song is a part of the battle that is concluding the episode with Rem and, these vampires, as I say, who at one point actually had their hands on Ritsuka, and, he ends up intervening once again, highfalutin kicks and, ninjutsu out the ass to get these guys spirited away. And we find through the dialogue, the lyrics rather, of the song that he sings, he's like this dark master, this wielder of dark magic and everything in his own right. Now, what I find interesting is in the course of the episode, do we find he has two names that he's known as, not just, Rem the Great, but he's said to be part of the Kaganuki family. And we actually hear some of his posse in the third library refer to him as the heir to Arland, or the Arland heir, whatever it is. And one of the, fellow posse corrects the guy. He's like, no, he's the Kaganuki heir for now. That's what he's going to be known as for now. That's very intriguing, because what is this Arland, lineage? What is that? What effect does that have on this whole scenario? Are these different factions kind of like the underworld theme, for those who are familiar with that movie, where you had vampires versus lycanthropes, the sort of werewolves and everything? Is it something along those lines? What exactly is it? Is it demons versus angels? Is it, I mean, there's still a lot of darkness, no pun intended, enrapturing the story and adding mystery to it, this enigmatic air that very much is what's keeping me drawn in. Basically, once they have gone back to school and you have everybody, all the crowds in the school are enamored and or jealous by the fact that Ritsuka has been brought back to school by Rem. She's getting out of his limousine, and the girls are all like, oh, I'm going to, destroy her if she's trying to make a move on him and all this kind of stuff. Completely missing the entire objective. And I also love that the continuity, they followed up on the fact that Asuna, was very much scared out of her mind and worried for Ritsuka. I don't think we saw her calling Asuna in the previous episode to let her know where she was going to be staying, that she was going to be staying at Rem's mansion for all intents and purposes. So she was probably worrying, beyond worry, and she's just grateful to see her friend. But then, of course, she kind of feels shunned because you basically have Ritsuka summoned to the third library once again, and she has to leave Asuna hanging, because what follows on from that summoning is them going to investigate the grandfather's house. But in this episode, we're finally getting the names of all these other characters in what I refer to as Rem's posse, but I don't know. They do seem adversarial, playfully. They do seem to be competing between each other. I don't know what all their relationships are. Are they a cult? Is Rem the leader of that cult? Are they his underlings? Are they all there, with equal prowess and power? Not exactly sure, but we meet Yuri, who has, apparently flowers, and he tries to, tempt Ritsuka with a flower. You have Shiki, who's the purple-haired sort of, I don't know, he almost reminds me of the sidekick character from the original Frankenstein movie, whose name escapes me off the top of my head, but he's very chilling, and he's almost getting off on the idea of, picturing Ritsuka going through some kind of hardship and he just seems to be shuddering excitedly over it. We saw glimpses of this in the first episode, and he kind of unnerves me for that reason. Then we have Mage, who is the very much tallest among them, reminded me kind of Thor, Chris Hemsworth, that kind of look, that aesthetic. And he's like, oh, don't worry with these other guys. You come to me and I'll protect you. And they're all really competing for her attentions and affections. And I don't think they're going to get anywhere. I think the only one that stands any iota of a chance would be Rem, probably. But as I say, Rem is very much, he seems to be at least working with also having it in mind to figure out where this forbidden grimoire is. That's what these vampires are after, and I still call it into question. Are they hired guns by Rem, or are they, is it something he's utilizing to make himself look heroic, but he's really not? Is this an actual separate faction of vampires, and whereas he might be the leader of a demon cult, or he might be the devil incarnate himself, and they're all vying for this forbidden grimoire, whatever that represents. But, basically Ritsuka knew that her grandfather had some history with this, and presumably that's where, with the GPS allocation, that's where they would have been taking her mother, and her mother's awareness. They must assume she has a higher awareness. And it seems like Rem is kind of grasping at straws, trying to see if Ritsuka herself has that kind of awareness, which she doesn't appear to, unless she's like in denial, or we're going to find out, there's some forgotten memory that has to be reawoken inside her, something along those lines. With all the mysticism and the charm she wears to protect her and everything like that, there could be any of those things going on. And of course, by the end of the episode, after we have them, shooting back and forth effectively, and the house is burned down when they've gotten back to Rem's mansion. I presume it's the mansion and not the school or her homestead, but effectively her brother has made the return trip home. We knew that he was going to, based on his dialogue in the previous episode, but he has officially arrived. And at least this episode ends with sort of the tension of he and Rem looking at each other, eagle-eyeing each other distrustfully, and I have that suspicion that her brother might know more about what's going on, because it seemed like he had some sort of religious doctrination. He was wearing like what I could only assume was a priest's outfit, something like that, a Catholic priest or something, some such like that. And to see him having returned and giving Rem this look, it could be the familial older brother thing where I want to protect my younger sister. I can personally relate to that. I have a younger sister, and any guy who looks in her direction, I'm always going to be standing in the doorway when they're going out on dates. Let them know that I'm here. I'll be waiting. If that kind of thing. Protective brother, And so it could be that. I saw some people talking about elsewhere who talked about the first episode, that their suspicions were it might lean a little bit toward something more than familial dynamic between brother and sister, and I hope the hell that's not the case. We had enough of that loose sort of roving around, that kind of aesthetic in Sword Art Online, and whereas it was all misguided and it was all misassumptions and everything, and it was just about a very sad and lonely character who didn't understand one person was somebody else than who they thought they were. It turned out to be her brother, and that kind of situation. She knows in this show this is her brother, so I hope there's not going to be overexertion of uncomfortability in their relationship, in that dynamic, to this person's point, their speculations. But I am heavily invested in wanting to know what this grimoire represents. Why all of these people, these vampires, and whatever Rem and his posse is, whether they are a unit or they're on separate sort of footings, why they are all vying for it, why Ritsuka herself seems to be the pinpoint, the pinnacle of that, that whole surrounding affair. And we do find out that her mother actually has a sister who's said to have died when she was a baby, but with stories like this, I mean, we could find out she's like a witch priestess or something that comes out of nowhere at some point down the line. And one point that I really loved, again, humanizing the Rem character, even though he seems to really want to kind of like the Spock from Star Trek thing. He wants to distance himself from seeming overly warm and, compassionate and human, is when they're in the car and he's like, oh, you haven't eaten at all today. You should eat, keep up your strength and just go about the normalcy of life, you know, that kind of thing, the day-to-day routine. Don't let yourself starve and weaken, and, you know, all these kinds of things. And he pulls out all this food for it to go in the limousine, and we see him picking at sushi and taking out mushrooms. And I loved him from the moment he said it. Mushrooms are not food. You're damn right. As far as I'm concerned, I hate mushrooms. It's a fungus, for F's sake, you know. It grows off trees and everything like that. Ugh. I've always hated the taste of mushrooms. The lack of taste, really. You know, so he had me there. I was like, hell yes, brother, you know. But this episode was actually really, really cool. It was even that much better than the first one because we had so much forward momentum, not by leaps and bounds, not any sort of, you know, heavy revelations, but the story was moving along at a very good clip, and seeing all these other characters, you know, in the third library vying for it. So, of course, it would be very interesting if they all start to really get heated in their competitorship along those lines. But I'm really intrigued by Rem's investment and involvement in her. Why he is protecting her. He seems taken aback when, you know, toward the end of the episode, he comes out of the burning house. He's fine, he's safe, and she comes up and, like, not quite embraces him, but, like, leans up on him, you know, very much relieved that he's okay. And it seems almost alien to him. So what the dynamic is there, what his interests are, what his back history is, you know, when they talk about an Arlond heir, whatever that is, they sort of pan up to this painting. It looks like a portrait of maybe like the 1600s or something, an entire city, and it looks like there's smoke and maybe like the city is inflamed, you know. And I'm wondering if we're going to find that, like, as is the case with vampires in vampire fiction, you know, they are almost immortal. They can be around for centuries and centuries. Are we going to find something along those lines with Rem and his posse? Because it is called Dance with Devils, and I do like that, again, that very rock opera, gothic horror mixture of having this great story, this gothic story unfolding, and you have this character who, you know, he's a badass. Basically, we see him throwing down with these vampires, and it's not very much for Ritsuka's benefit, it's for our benefit to watch him doing this. And as I say, in a very operatic, very sort of, you know, choreographed way that goes along with the song in the episode. And I kind of hope they remain close to this theme. Whenever we're going to hear songs, I hope that they feel as well fitted as it did in this episode, because I'm enjoying the hell out of it, quite frankly. And I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of episode 2 of Dance with Devils, if you've seen it, if you enjoyed it as much as I did. If not, why not? Let me know in the comments below whatever issues you may have with it. We can agree to disagree, you know, if it comes to that. But I heavily enjoyed this episode, and I'd love to hear from you guys whether you did or not. So otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.